All right, so you don't have the sleep in to look forward to, but on the other hand, theoretically, at least, you should have more energy than you do on Friday night. Is that a fair assessment?
That's right, because I haven't quite worn myself totally out. Although I've been trying this week. It was supposed to be a light week, but apparently I forgot what the term light meant, and I've been overloading myself. So,
all right. Well, in our last episode on Tuesday, you fielded a question from Phil Hall in London, and it turned out to be one of your greatest rants. People really got into how many times you used his name in the course of about a 2-3 minute answer, I guess it was. People were guessing how many times you said his name. It was about, I think it's like 2 or 3 minutes long. Do you know how many times would you guess that you said his name?
14.
14. All right, that's a good guess. Anne, do you want to take a guess?
10.
All right, good guess. As a public service, I spent a good deal of time last night painstakingly editing a video with all the Phil mentions. And so at this time, I would like to play it. And you will get the answer to that very important question. Oh, in London, do ordinary people love their kleptocratic oligarchy now? Is Russia united behind its rich people?
Well, Phil Hall in London, what a question to ask. I mean, I don't think that was a serious question, was it, Phil? The oligarch class has been destroyed, Phil. I met the person who audits them and puts their asses in jail if they dare break the damn law, Phil. This is why, Phil. Why? Because the money's being reinvested in Russia, Phil. So, yeah, I think the Russians are pretty damn happy with their oligarch class today, Phil. I think they like their rich people, Phil, because the economy's working, Phil, unlike the British economy, Phil, which is failing on a daily basis. Phil, how do you like your rich people, Phil? That's the better question.
And the number is 12. So one of you said 10, the other said 14. So right in between.
Right in the middle.
We split it. Yeah, good job. We bracketed that number quite well.
All right. So when you gave me the go-ahead to see if Phil would be up for a debate, I contacted him. And initially he said yes, but then he decided he didn't want to do it because he thought you would cream him. So I don't mean to make fun of him. I actually admire his honesty. Phil, by the way, is the editor or the executive editor of a publication called Ars Notoria in London. And he decided instead, thank you, Anne, with that lightning quick speed. He decided instead to leave a voicemail message to kind of sum up what his position is. So let's give that a listen.
Hi, Scott and Jeff. I don't mind it if Scott gets annoyed at me. That's fine. So this is what I think. I don't want to debate with Scott because I don't think I'm the right person to debate with. I think Scott should talk to legitimate critical voices inside Russia. For example, to the leader of the Communist Party. There's no point in him debating me. I'm not Russian. I'm not in a position to argue the case for a fairer Russian society. If you remember, I was asking Scott a question. I wasn't giving him an answer. And in my view, Scott should not be advocating exclusively for people who are currently ruling the Russian Federation. It makes him easier to dismiss as a stooge. He should balance it out a little by talking to the main opposition. And by opposition, I don't mean Navalny. Russian nationalism won't smooth over the cracks in Russian society, and the soldiers returning home from war will be demanding all the benefits a decent social democracy can give. I think Scott should invite onto your show the leader of the official opposition in Russia, the Communist Party, to talk about the tragedy of the 90s and discuss the progress made since then and the future of Russia in a multipolar world. Thank you very much. I'm a fan of the show.
Well, thank you, Phil. Does Phil have a point?
I think anytime you think that one side has exclusive, control of the truth or has all the answers, you're wrong. You should always be asking questions. You should always be open to other points of view. And of course, there's an opposition in Russia, and of course, it should be heard and it should be considered. And I concede to Phil that that's important. But I also think that Phil probably needs to concede that I have spent a lot of time in Russia talking to a lot of different people from who possess different perspectives. And even the opposition in Russia is united in their support for Vladimir Putin in this conflict, and are recognizing that while everybody yearns for power and return to power, that Putin's done a pretty damn good job in taking Russia from the 90s. I have spent a lot of time. I was there in the late 80s and in 1990. I saw the beginning of the collapse. My family has relatives who lived through the 90s. We are intimately familiar with the reality they faced. I have friends who worked there in the 90s and are cognizant of what that reality was. I worked with many Russians during the 1990s, government officials, etc., and again, am cognizant of what the 1990s were. And so I think I am well positioned to make an informed analysis of the transformation that has taken place in Russia from the 90s until today. And my dad is pretty up to date. I had a pretty lengthy visit in May, and I've followed it up with a lengthy visit in December and January, where I wasn't just hanging out with the elite insiders. I was associating with the people. But Phil is being. Phil is correct. One must have an open mind. One must always have an open mind. The moment you think you have all the answers, the moment you think that you are the sole source of correct information, is the moment all is lost. So Phil has a point, and I will do my best, Phil, to maintain an open mind and always.
Well, I think his specific suggestion is to interview somebody who has that point of view, either interview them or to debate them or whatever. Yeah.
Here's my concern about that. Mm-hmm. Russia's having a presidential election in March. Do I really want to interview somebody from the opposition and give them a platform? Is it my job to do that? I'll be more than happy to interview somebody from the opposition in April once the election's done, but I'm not going to play a game of getting involved in domestic politics. I just think that would be unwise at this point in time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, Phil, we just posted a comment from Phil. He's watching right now. He said, "My respect." So thank you for that, Phil. So I guess he won't be the Newman of this show after all. Remember on Seinfeld, every time Newman showed up, Jerry would say, "Hello, Newman," with contempt dripping. That's what I was thinking of when you kept saying Phil.
Hello, Newman.
No, all Phil just got me. That Phil's question got me when my panties were in a bunch, or whatever the term they say is. I was just not in a good mood at that point in time, so I apologize. My objective in anything I do is never to be insulting and never to be disrespectful. On occasion, my emotions get in the way. I do have a temper, and sometimes it's there, and I apologize, Phil, if anything I said was demeaning or insulting. It wasn't intended to be that way. I have a quick correction, because we do work on being very accurate in this show, and I try to be accurate in everything I do. And I don't think it was on this show, but it was in one of the interviews I did when I was talking about Iran and the population of Iran. And I was on a roll. My mouth was going 9 miles a minute, and my brain was trying to catch up. And I had committed to coming up with a number. and I know what the population of Iran is. But as I was speaking, the number was just an absolute blank. So I grabbed the first number that came to my head, and I knew the moment I said it was wrong. I said 40 million was the population. Iran's population is closer to 90 million. So for all the people out there who were very kind and pointed out that I made a mistake, thank you. And I just wanted to make sure that I corrected the record in public, because again, we don't want to be the purveyors of incorrect data. If our motto is knowledge is power, we sort of need to make sure that the knowledge that we are imparting is factually correct.
But if you are going to make a mistake, I think it's good to do it on somebody else's podcast.
Correct. I made sure, Jeff, that I did that. I saved my mistakes for other people's podcasts.
All right. Continuing with the tradition we started on Tuesday, we're going to give away a coin at the end of the show, and we are going to let the audience, or the winner, I should say, decide which one he wants.
What did the winner choose last time?
I think it was the new one.
Okay.
I'll check later to give you a definitive answer on that. So this is the one from May, the older one that we have for sale at scottrittermerch.com.
The original, the OG.
The original, the OG of coins, exactly. And this is the special New Year's coin, very limited edition. We'll be selling a few of those in a couple of weeks or so. All right. So if you want to enter the drawing, type in #coin in the live chat only, not the comments after the show, live chat only. All right, let's go to the questions from our beloved audience. The first one is from The Cheap Shot, Levy in the United States. Any thoughts on the $1,000 Ukrainian drone, which sank a $1 billion Russian flagship today? Those drones are pretty efficient, aren't they?
Well, that is a cheap shot, Levy, because A, your facts are just sort of flawed. There was a swarm of sea drones that targeted a Russian corvette. The corvette is an older ship. It most definitely is not the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. And I think 6 or 8 of them attacked. Most of them were destroyed, but a couple got through and sank the ship. I think the ship, the cost of the ship is actually closer to $40 million in that area. The drones, of course, are a fraction of that cost. And, from a cost efficiency standpoint, it is what it is. But it also indicates that war is hell and that the Ukrainians are a lethal opponent, and that, Russia can't let its guard down. I always remind people that the bloodiest month of World War II for American troops in fighting Nazi Germany wasn't June, D-Day, going across the beach at Normandy. It wasn't December, the Battle of the Bulge, big battles, big casualties. It was April 1945, when the war was over. Everybody knew Germany had been defeated. There was no hope. We lost more people that month because the Germans were desperate. The Germans fought back with ferocity. They were fighting for their homeland. It was desperate acts, and we paid the price. Russia's won this war. There's no doubt. Ukraine can't change the trajectory that the events are on right now. But that doesn't mean that Ukraine can't win tactical victories. And Ukraine just had a tactical victory. They used a new weapon that people are still adapting to. I would hope that the U.S. Navy is looking at this and understanding that if the Houthi or the Iranians perfect this technology, that we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, it's this is a very effective weapon. It's been used to attack the Crimea Bridge. It's been used to attack other ships, and now it had success against an older Russian corvette. It's tragic for the Russians. There apparently were. It's a crew of 56. I saw a note. Somebody said around 40 were on board. I don't know. And they went down. My understanding is that search and rescue operations were initiated, and I don't think they found anybody. So who knows? I don't know of the official report. But at the end of the day, this changes nothing. It's a blip on the radar screen. It's a momentary PR victory for Ukraine, but it doesn't change the fact that on the battlefield in Ukraine today, Russia is on the offensive. Virtually on the entire length of the line of connectivity, and the Russians are winning, and Ukraine's losing 20 to 30,000 men a month. Russia's gaining 20 to 30,000 men a month. So that correlation of forces and just basic military math means that Ukraine's on a downward trajectory, Russia's on an upward trajectory, and that's just the way it's going to continue to go.
And what about in the bigger picture, Scott? Is it fair to say that just in terms of how wars are fought nowadays, that drone warfare is a game changer?
Oh, that's 100%. I had a very, very interesting conversation with a very prominent, I guess several prominent Russian commanders, and we were talking about the revolution in warfare that's taken place in Ukraine today, and drones change everything. They've redefined the battlefield. Let's look at it from the Ukrainian perspective. They've run out of artillery ammunition. They just don't have the ammunition they need. There's specific. We have 155 millimeter ammunition, but there's specific calibers, and gosh, I can't remember if it's 52 or 56. I think it's 52, and then there's 36. But the 52 is the longer range artillery rounds. They're out of that ammunition, and that puts them at a distinct disadvantage to the Russians. And so what the Ukrainians are doing is they're turning to these suicide drones, these the FPV, first person view drones. If you watch Telegram channels, you'll see the picture of the camera coming in, zooming in on the target and hitting the target and blowing it up. And the Ukrainians have basically replaced artillery in certain parts of the battlefield with these FPV drones, which they're just saturating the front lines, and they're, they pick off vehicles, they pick off artillery, they pick off men. It's a problem, and the Iranian or the Ukrainians are doing it, but the Russians are doing it as well. And the Russians are doing it in a very systemic fashion. They have more drones, they have more different varieties, and the integration of drones into the Russian scheme of operations is done in a very disciplined, systemic way. The guy I talked to, who runs a major section of the battlefield, said that, it used to be that drones were a supporting arm, meaning that you would use traditional approaches in the battlefield, fire support plan with artillery, air support. Then you'd maneuver in with your armor supported by infantry. And then drones would factor in as a supporting element of the operation. What he says right now is that the first thing you do is you overlay your drone operation, your overall surveillance, and then you break the battlefield into drone sectors of operation where you have additional surveillance, followed by the FPVs, followed by the land sets for medium strike, bring in the geraniums for long range. They use drones for resupply, logistics. Because of the FPV issue, if you have troops in a forward area, you used to have to drive a vehicle in to resupply them. And that vehicle is very vulnerable to attack by FPV drones. So now they actually have drones that fly in and drop off food, ammunition, medicine to the troops and bring them out. So drones can be used for intelligence, signals intelligence, etc. You do that, and once you establish your drone concept of operations, then the tanks, the artillery, and the infantry is brought in to support this. So war sort of flipped the script here. The general that did this was pulled off of the front recently, and he's been sent to the General Staff Academy, where his job is, I believe, to help capture this into a doctrinal manual that'll be used to train everybody on the same, because right now what's happening on both sides is this is a revolution in warfare. So literally what happened is, and I spoke to another commander, and this is what he did. He sat down and he said, who are the gamers here? You know, and you have a bunch of pimply faced boys go, I play computer games. And he goes, all right, boys, come here. How many of you guys have done the, what's that, virtual reality thing where you put a thing? Oh, yeah, we play those games. Good. Sit down, put this on there, learn how to fly this thing. And it's a computer game. And they become the drone operators. And these geeks start employing the drones. Now, I call them geeks and I make fun of them. Understand that drone warfare is deadly. If you screw up, meaning that if you give away the location where you're operating, because a drone is a communication signal, you're emitting a signal. The enemy can direct and find you, pound you, and kill you. So a lot of these geeks that I'm making fun of are pretty brave guys who die in battle because they're out there doing this and they get detected, they get killed. So they have to come up with ways to survive, like offsetting their communication system. So they run a hard line from where they're controlling the drone to an antenna that's further away that's used to, and then that antenna may actually get a relay in, and then they find a way to jam those frequencies or to hop those frequencies so that they can't be jammed. So they get the computer geeks that are in there, you know, changing the frequencies that they communicate on and everything to make everything survivable, because the enemy, the Ukrainians, have done the same thing. They get the geeks in there, the computer gamers. And so you have a gamer war going on. And then they start designing their own drones. They get 3D printers right there on the front line. These geeks will sit there and come up with a new idea. They'll print it up, get it designed. If it works, they mass produce it. And it's sort of haphazard approach where they're learning, but they're not capturing the experience. So your battalions have to reinvent the wheel as their geeks talk to each other and all that. So what the Russians are trying to do is capture all of these lessons and get the best practices and turn it into doctrine so that everybody's operating on the same sheet of music, so that drone support operations are identical. And it's just a revolution in warfare. And it's not just the drones on the ground, but we see them at sea. These British main drones are having a major impact. They are harassing the Russian fleet. They've done damage.
Well, I'm not sure how many drones were used in this particular incident, Scott, but what occurs to me is, since drones are relatively inexpensive, is it much of a strategy being used by, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or anybody who has drones, is it much of a strategy to just overwhelm the enemy with a tremendous amount of drones?
Well, that's what the Ukrainian approach is right now. Mm-hmm. And that's apparently what they did with this ship. I think the number is either 6 or 8. I read something, but they came in with more than one, more than two, and they swarmed in, and so the defenses on the ship were overwhelmed. They have crews out there with machine guns and such, and they're scanning, and they saw the drones coming in, and they're firing at them. And you can see, as the drones approaching in, you can see the machine gun rounds impacting the water nearby. But the drone got through and struck it. They blew up some, but some got through. It's the same thing with these FPV drones. The sad thing is, if you don't have the means to jam it or to shoot it down, once it locks on you, you're dead. That's the reality. And you see these videos where they're just playing with the guys. The guys are running and the drone's just playing. And then in the end, the drone just dives in and blows them up. There's no hiding from the drone unless you have the ability to jam it, to burn out the electronics. And so they're developing these drone protect. And when I was in Moscow, back on May Day, if people remember, or not May Day, Victory Day, on May 3rd, Ukraine launched a drone that hit the Kremlin. And so the question is now, on Victory Day, what's going to happen? And so as you're walking in through the security, they have these anti-drone teams walking around that have these funky things that look like they're out of Star Wars, these weapons. And they're basically designed to fry the electronics or to take over or somehow jam the signal. And then around the Kremlin, you had these giant sniper rifles with spotting crews. And basically their job was, if the drone is spotted coming in, their job is to is to shoot it down, because you don't want to be launching a missile inside an urban area, because what goes up must come down. And so you see these drone sniper positions over the place. They're, both sides are developing counter drone technology, but as you develop counter drone technology, then they modify drones to overcome that. So there's this continuous battle. Like I said, the battalions have teams of AI techs who are on the front lines actively monitoring what's going on, who can make modifications of the drone's communication system in the middle of a battle. So if the enemy has a solution that's preventing your drones from doing what they're supposed to do, these AI techs sit there and they rewire and reprogram and recalibrate the drones right there on the battlefield and send them back out. So it is very much a game changer.
Game changers. Changes to the game such that the game can never be played the same way again.
Vasily in Chucky, Tennessee. Have you ever heard of Chucky, Tennessee?
Tonight for the first time.
Same here. U.S. and NATO have already crossed all red lines, according to our Chucky friend, although they are not able to defeat Russia in real combat. But they will be using more and more NATO high-range missiles on Russian territory. At what point will Russia be able to retaliate on decision-making centers in the U.S. in order to stop prolonging this conflict?
I mean, Russia could do that right now. It's not a lack of ability. It's that Russia isn't going to play that game. Russia's won this war. Why would Russia throw away this victory, this hard-earned victory, by doing something that would drag the United States, drag NATO into this conflict? Not only complicating the victory, but maybe, ripping the victory out of their hands at the last minute. Vladimir Putin has made reference to this fact that all of these things that the United States and NATO are doing right now, all these red lines that they've crossed, are deliberately designed to provoke Russia into an overreaction. Russia's not going to take that bait. Russia is accomplishing its objectives. It's defeated the Ukrainian army. It's in the process of dismantling the Ukrainian army. Will have red lines been crossed? Absolutely. Will red lines continue to be crossed? Absolutely. But until which time these red lines, confront Russia with a threat to their ability to achieve their victory, Russia's not going to change what they're doing. They have a memory. There will be justice, and eventually there will be an accounting for what's been done here. But I don't see Russia changing what it's doing, because what it's doing right now is a winning hand. They're winning militarily on the battlefield. They haven't just defeated Ukraine. They've defeated the collective West. They're winning economically. They've defeated sanctions. The Russian economy is growing. The International Monetary Fund has acknowledged that the Russian economy is growing at a rate greater than they had anticipated. Meanwhile, the nations that are sanctioning Russia, their economies are paying a heavier price than had been anticipated. And the Russians are winning politically. The Chinese defense minister just said straight up, we're with Russia on Ukraine, something the West has been trying to prevent. He said, no, that's that. The collective, the developing world, the global South is aligning with Russia. Africa, ECOWAS is an organization, the ECOWAS, West African States, the Economic Cooperation Organization of West African States. Created in 1975, I believe, basically by France, Britain, and Portugal, the three nations that had owned the colonies that now comprise ECOWAS, as a means of controlling their colonies in a post-colonial African reality. And what we've seen is since 2020, three founding members of ECOWAS, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have they've overthrown their pro-French governments, replaced them with military juntas that are saying we are going to look out for our own people, our own interests. They've evicted the French military from their soil. ECOWAS threatened military intervention, and they said bring it on. They formed their own military alliance, and now they've all, without exception, gone over to the Russians. And so the Russians now are the big players in Africa. They're getting more powerful, more influential. You see this trend. BRICS, the original 5 members are about ready to double their membership with the inclusion of Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Ethiopia are joining BRICS, and Russia said that they plan on further expansion. So from an economic standpoint, from a geopolitical standpoint, a political standpoint, a military standpoint, the West has lost the conflict with Russia. There.
Oh, all right. That's the end. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I sort of lost track of the question. I forgot what I was actually answering. So,
all right. I was just thinking about whether or not Elvis Costello is going to have a horn section tomorrow night.
Well, boy, I can tell you, my answer is rambling, and Jeff's like, "Is Elvis going to have a horn section tonight?"
The internet is a double-edged sword in many ways. I feel for these artists. Remember in the old days when there was no internet, you would be anticipating the concert, not really knowing what it's going to be, and the artist was able to surprise you. But now, yeah. So he had a horn section the other night in Nashville, and it was great. And now I'm going to be disappointed if there's no horn section. So that's.
Well, I would imagine it wasn't a Nashville only horn section. I would imagine that they're the musicians that rehearse with Elvis Costello throughout this tour.
No. That's just it. Because I follow this on the internet. No, he does. The horn section is not usually with him. Yeah, he's great with
a phone call.
Well, or I'll just show up and but see, if I didn't have this in my head, I'd enjoy it without the horn section. Now I'll be disappointed if they don't show. Look how great he is with the horns. I'll show it to you.
Assassination Squad, where I will be on the evening of March 18th. I'm joking.
Yes, I did. And I thought about that. And then I said to myself, but you do speaking engagements.
I know. I'm joking. I'm joking. Okay. Well, I will just have to bounce this off Siri, but if I can bribe Siri, I would love to take you up on this extraordinarily kind offer.
Bring Siri. I'd love to hang with Siri, but I only have 2 tickets.
Well, I guess you'll stay home and Siri and I will see the concert.
Well, we could do something. We could do something else. So, on the same trip besides that.
I don't think Siri is not the greatest Bob Dylan fan in the world.
So good. So we go to the concert and then, but we spend a couple of days and do other stuff with Siri. That's just a thought.
We will work it out, Jeff. We will. Thank you for the offer. Siri is now aware of the offer, and Siri and I will be in communication about this. We do talk. We live in the same house, and we actually communicate on occasion. So I we'll do it. Thank you, Jeff. I would like to guarantee that I could be there, but out of respect to Siri, I have to actually go through her first. But I'm letting her know that my inclination.
I understand. 8th row center.
8th row center. I mean, Siri, how can you turn down 8th row center? You can't. That's the answer.
It's not dead center. You see exactly where they are.
I see, because if they target center, they'll miss us. This is good.
All right. They're not going to get you. Don't worry. They'll get me too if they get you. That would be terrible. Benoit, do you know how to pronounce this? I don't want to screw up this name. Scott, are you there?
I'm here.
Do you know how to pronounce
Benoit Gerin Lajoie.
Oh, not bad. Please tell Scott how to use his mic. See attachment. All right, here's the attachment.
I speak into the mic because
he says don't talk into it directly. Yeah. You see how I talk directly into it? Because that's what you're supposed to do with the kind of mic I have. He said with yours, should be straight up, perpendicular, and you talk into the side of it.
Like this?
Well, I can't see it, but I think you know what perpendicular is. Right, exactly. Straight up, and you talk into the side of it.
Well, can you hear me when I talk like this?
I don't notice any difference, but I'll take his word for it that it was designed that way. We can look it up on the World Wide Web too. But anyway, that's what he suggested.
I'm trusting the guy. Yeah.
All right. So there you go. We're always endeavoring to improve here.
There's an interesting guy in the comments. RC Crawler, who's just being a real dick tonight. I see you, Aussie RC Crawlers. And
should we send a drone after him?
I'll drone his ass. Okay. Next.
Should we move on before we get kicked off YouTube for issuing threats?
Did I issue a threat? I didn't issue a threat.
No, you were borderline. You held back. You restrained yourself admirably. Essa, in the United States of America, what do you think the outcome of the negotiated truce in Gaza will be? There is talk of a negotiated truce.
Well, I think it would be the end of Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu and the far right members of his far right government have said that there will be no truce, no ceasefire. So to have one is a victory for Hamas. They said there will be no prisoner exchange. If they do one, that would be a victory for Hamas. Virtually they would be conceding. Remember, they said when this conflict started that they will not only physically destroy Hamas as a military organization to ensure that Hamas would never again be able to perpetrate something along the lines of October 7th, but they would also eliminate Hamas as a political movement, that Hamas would never again be able to be seen as a leader of the Palestinian people. The exact opposite has happened. Hamas has fought the Israelis to a standstill on the battlefield, compelling many Israeli units to be withdrawn because they're suffering their casualties are too high. Israel has said at this late stage in the war that they can only account for 20% of the Hamas tunnels. And I always wonder how they come up with 20%. That means they have an idea of what 100% is, and they have no idea. So I think Israel has no clue what the percentage is, but they acknowledge that they haven't even dented it, that the tunnel network is still there. Hamas is down in the tunnel network. Hamas senior leadership is still intact. And if there were elections today, Hamas would win the vast majority of the votes, not only in Gaza, but in all of the West Bank. Hamas would be the president and control the legislative body of the Gazan population. The international community is rallied around the Palestinian cause. The International Court of Justice has ruled against Israel on the issue of genocide. So Netanyahu's only hope to maintain political viability was to continue this war. And now, if he takes a ceasefire, he stops being a wartime leader. And now people start asking questions, rightfully so. Why did how did October 7th happen? Netanyahu has to pay the price. Then they'll also start asking questions about the conduct of the war, the genocide, how it's destroyed Israel, and he'll be removed from office. And remember, he lost his bid to reshape the Israeli judiciary in a manner which would prevent him from being, prosecuted, tried for, crimes that he's been alleged to have committed, crimes of corruption. So, as soon as he steps down as prime minister, he's going to be indicted and put on trial. And if he's found guilty, he'll spend the rest of his life in jail. So this is a big moment for Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think that he can accept the ceasefire and then stay in power much longer, but I don't think he has any choice. The United States is starting to put the kind of pressure on him that they should have put on originally, sanctioning settlers and beginning to tighten the screws. So, I think it's all over for Benjamin Netanyahu if he buys into this. So you're going to see his.
Can you say that name again, please? That was a Joe Biden pronunciation.
Yeah,
it's
I did. I
stumbled
that one. Yeah.
Benjamin
Netanyahu. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. All right. It must be the Yeti microphone's position that.
Well, I'm confused now because I was used to it positioned one way, and now it's positioned another way, and it's intimidating me. But that's okay.
Let's ask the audience if you notice any difference. How does it sound? Now, the Elvis music was a little too loud, so I brought it down, and then I noticed Scott's sound was too low, so I brought it up. So the other question I have for the audience, and Ann, if you could get any comments on this. Are Scott and I at about the same volume? That's one question. And the other is, notice any difference since he changed his mic? Hamad in London, given the recent attack on U.S. forces and the imminent retaliation, is it a foregone conclusion that a regional war will ensue involving, amongst others, the U.S. and Iran?
No, it's not a foregone conclusion because the United States knows that if it engages in a regional war against Iran, it will lose. Iran has made it clear that any retaliation that strikes Iranian soil or is seen as targeting Iranian interests, that that they will retaliate, and the retaliation will be done in a manner which is designed to destroy American capabilities in the region. So, and Biden knows this. He understands this. The Pentagon has informed them of this reality. So, I think the last thing that the United States and Iran want is a general war between the two powers. So, I think you're going to see them dancing around that issue, and hopefully the conflict in Gaza gets resolved before a mistake is made. And the conflict does break out. But right now, neither country wants that kind of conflict, and since both sides don't want it, it's hard to see how it would happen.
On Tuesday, I mentioned that you've been warning about the insanity of attacking Iran for years, and I mentioned, I think it was in 2006, when you were with Seymour Hersh in New York, the old "pick your city" rant, and I dug it up out of mothballs. Let's take a look. Scott is consistent, if nothing else. This is from 2006.
We use nuclear weapons. The genie ain't going back in the bottle until an American city is taken out by an Islamic weapon in retaliation. So tell me, you want to go to war with Iran? Pick your city. Pick your city. Tell me which one you want gone. Seattle, LA, Boston, New York, Miami. Pick one, because at least one's going. And that's something we should all think about before we march down this path of insanity that George Bush has us headed on.
Who's that good-looking young man?
There he is, huh? A golden oldie.
Good God.
Now,
what kind of
I'm sure
glasses was I wearing back then?
That's of course what you hone in on, the physical appearance. But what I'm honing in on is that, you meant it rhetorically back then, but I think at this point, we might want to actually think about giving up a couple of U.S. cities. What about San Francisco? What do you think? We don't really need San
I could
Francisco.
never encourage violence against an American city.
No. I'm not encouraging violence. I'm just saying we don't really need San Francisco.
San Francisco is actually a beautiful city, and they have the Marine Memorial Hotel, which has a Marine. I've stayed there several times, and if San Francisco could get its act together, it's a romantic city. It's a beautiful city, and I love San Francisco. I haven't been there since the zombies have taken over, but what they've done to San Francisco, what they've done to LA.
Yeah, right.
I can't ever say that I've fallen in love with LA, but there's some fun times in LA. You and I have had some good times in LA.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah,
remember the great the Gore Vidal incident? I was just thinking. Remember in the driving rainstorm?
Wasn't it?
It was an incident. Remember the driving rainstorm and going over to Tim Robbins Theater? When the hotel wouldn't let us use cameras in your own hotel room that we paid for,
and we were fantasizing about Tommy Morello and seeing if we could get him to. Good times.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, I just used that as an excuse to segue into a voicemail message from a woman named Elisa in San Francisco, the smash and grab feces capital of California.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Jeff. This is Elisa from San Francisco. I have a question about the settlers. If IDF continues to train and arm the settlers, what is their status in a military conflict? Are they considered militia? And are they a fair target in a conflict? Thanks.
I think they would be considered a organized militia if they wear uniforms or special identifying marks. They would be considered a lawful combatant, and therefore, could be engaged as a military unit. But they need to be treated, as lawful combatants, meaning that you capture them, you have to treat them in accordance with the Geneva Convention, etc. So. Yeah, that's the status I would think. I think that these self-defense units that the settlers have would be considered to be a lawful military organization, and the members would be expected to be treated with the same, rights as as you would a soldier.
All right. This is from K in the U.S. I don't know if that's an ordinary K or a special K. Let's assume it's special. I can't believe I got a laugh out of you. That was a terrible joke. Do you think Netanyahu, that's pronounced Netanyahu.com, would prefer Trump to win the upcoming elections? K is concerned about ending up with another Zionist president.
Every American president is a Zionist. Let's look at the top three candidates right now. We got Joe Biden, who says, I'm a Zionist. Tegan is a Zionist. My dog who's making noises in the background, she's speaking out in support of my contention. Donald Trump is the ultimate Zionist. He moved the American embassy to Jerusalem. He's a staunch supporter of Israel, and we now know that RFK Jr. is a Zionist, hangs out with Shmuley Boteach, and staunch supporter of Israel and all this. So it doesn't matter. The American political establishment is bought and paid for by the Israeli lobby. AIPAC influences the U.S. Congress, influences the presidential race. Just look at the circus, and you'll see it. I mean, we're getting into that silly season of American politics. I think AIPAC's convention is in March. And watch how everybody gravitates there. Everybody, Republicans, Democrats alike, and it's sort of like this litmus test. Who could get up there and basically debase themselves in the cause of Israel more than anybody else. Get up there and just talk about how they love Israel, how they will support Israel. Mike Johnson, the new speaker, he's supposed to be looking out for you and me. That's his job. What was the first thing he did as Speaker of the House? The very first thing he did, stand up and say, my number one priority is to get aid to Israel. Well, bing, that sort of tells you he ain't American. None of them are American. They all work for Israel, every single one of them, one way or another. So, yeah, it doesn't matter who we elect as president there, until which time Israel can be taken down a couple notches by the international community. I mean, here we have an opportunity. The International Court of Justice has found Israel that it's more likely than not what Israel's doing with the Palestinians is, relates to the genocide convention. So, if we can get enough, momentum against Israel, maybe there might be some policy changes, but the United States isn't going to lead on this issue. We're going to follow.
Trump is setting them up. I didn't understand that comment. Did you see that, Scott? Can you show that again, Ann?
Yeah, I mean, that's fanciful thinking. He is a Zionist. Every American politician is a Zionist.
Now, but when you say Congress is bought and paid for, I get that, but that doesn't quite explain how it connects to Trump. Is that his genuine belief, or you think he is doing it because that's what he thinks he needs to do politically?
Look, Trump has been involved in New York City politics and New York politics for a long time, and he knows the role that the Jewish lobby plays in everything. And so he's been playing that game forever. He knows the game. He knows exactly the game. I think Trump might be unique in that he doesn't believe in Israel, but he knows what he has to do to get political support. And so that's what he does.
Right. Okay. Yeah. John Avatable in Somerville, South Carolina. Can you comment on the Russia claim that it's been definitively established that the plane was shot down by an American Patriot air defense system, as Putin said on Wednesday regarding the IL-76 military
popularity amongst the Ukrainian people to become a political threat, a potential political threat to Zelensky. And so, Zelensky knows in order to retain the charade of, democracy, that he has to have elections, but he doesn't want to hold elections that he knows he's going to lose. And I think Zelensky recognizes that if he were to run against Zelensky in an open, fair, and free election, that he wouldn't be the president of Ukraine. So in order to create the conditions where he would be reelected, he needs to keep Zelensky out of office. But at the end of the day, if you take a look, if you go back into April 1945, I keep bringing this up, look at the relationship between Himmler, the head of the SS, loyal ally of Adolf Hitler, and Hitler himself. It was deteriorating to the point where at the end, Himmler was seeking to negotiate with the Allies on his own without authority. Hitler ordered him arrested and killed. It didn't matter because the Red Army was taking Berlin. So all this garbage between Zelensky and Zelensky and all this doesn't matter because none of them matter, because Russia's won this war, and Russia will dictate an outcome that will guarantee that neither of those men are going to be in power when this thing is done. Their day is over. It's finished.
One of the areas that the Russian military-industrial complex has advanced a lot was the area of drones. New Lancet, that it's called Product 53, and the new uranium. What's the importance of this area for Russians?
Well, I think drone warfare has revolutionized modern war. I don't think NATO, the United States, and others have quite figured out just how much the war has changed. Ukraine knows, because Ukraine is on the receiving end, and Ukraine is using drones very effectively too. From top to bottom, drones are thoroughly integrated into every aspect of tactics, operations, strategy. The two drones you mentioned, the Geranium 2, it's been upgraded with a jet engine, quieter. It uses composite material. It's painted black, which means that it can be employed at nighttime, and it's being employed very effectively. The Lancet Project 56 takes a very successful drone system, the Lancet, which has since the beginning of the war proven its worth. But they've increased the range. It now can operate at night as well as day. But here's the big thing: it operates as a swarm of drones. The Lancet no longer is a single piece of munition fired, controlled, and brought in individually. It can now be fired dozens at a time, that in a fire and forget mode, where they're fired into a region, they coordinate with each other, they share intelligence, they distinguish their own targets, and then they all go in and hit separate targets, saturating a battle space with this the capability. These are game-changing technologies to fight the new Geranium 2, which doesn't cost that much to produce. Ukraine is going to have to activate air defense radars, which are going to be detected by the Russians. They're going to have to fire air defense systems, and one Patriot missile or one Iris-T missile or one any modern system that the Ukrainians have cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per copy, whereas the Geranium 2 is tens of thousands of dollars. So right off the bat, Russia is bleeding the Ukrainians dry from a fiscal standpoint and from a capability standpoint, forcing them to use assets against a cheaper system, which if they don't shoot down, will hit the target it's going after with devastating results. So they have to shoot it down. In doing so, they expose these systems to newer systems coming in that can destroy these and go in through the gap created to hit strategic targets. It changes warfare, absolutely changes warfare. But where it's really where it gets really interesting is what's being done at the tactical level. These quadcopters that they're using are not only collecting tactical intelligence, but they're being used to devastating effect to drop grenades and more recently as what they call first-person kamikaze drones, FPV, first-person view, meaning that there's a camera on the front and the drone operator is guiding the drone into a bunker, onto a tank, onto artillery. And there are swarms of these drones operating throughout the theater, inflicting tremendous harm on the Ukrainians. They also use them to resupply. So as troops advance forward, they use drones to bring in ammunition resupply, to bring in food, to bring in medical supplies to forces that are otherwise would have been exposed, isolated, and subjected to being defeated. It's revolutionized war. As units maneuver, they now have drone units that maneuver with them to use these drones as fire support. So drones are being incorporated into the formal fire support planning of a Russian attack or a Ukrainian attack. They defensively, they have to have anti-drone capabilities, these guns, these jammers that are being used. It's transformed the battlefield. And at this point in time, the Russian dominance is so absolute that the Ukrainians are paralyzed. They can't move lest they be detected and killed by drones. The Russians have so many drones now that they're using them against individual Ukrainian soldiers. It's a game-changing technology, and it's playing a big role in why Russia is winning this war, and it's I think exposing fatal weaknesses in the West because we aren't prepared to fight this kind of war yet.
The other area of tremendous impact is the electronic warfare. Is Russia winning in this battle between the West, between NATO and Russia?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize this is one of the more sensitive areas, very classified. The Russians don't like to talk about it too much, so you can't claim to have absolute knowledge. What we know is a couple things. One, that the Ukrainians have acknowledged that the Russians are dominating the electronic warfare aspects of this conflict. They are preventing the Ukrainians from communicating effectively. That's a major thing, jamming. But they're also all the technology that we've given Ukraine, the HIMARS, the ATACMS, the JDAM satellite guided bombs, the Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles from Germany and in England. They're all being jammed very effectively by the Russians. The Ukrainians can't employ JDAM bombs anymore because the Russians just jam the signal and the bomb goes stupid. The majority of HIMARS are likewise jammed and made stupid by Russian electronic warfare. Even in the sphere of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, where NATO and the United States have been providing, very effective support to the Ukrainians. One of the reasons why the Ukrainians have achieved what they have on the battlefield is because of this intelligence support provided real time to Ukrainian units that can deliver artillery or deliver drones or deliver other supporting fires. But Russia, isn't sitting there just saying, okay, well, it is what it is. Strategically, I think there was a European satellite that was put up over Crimea. There's a lot of cloud cover in Crimea and indeed in eastern Ukraine, and conventional imaging satellites are not as effective because they can't see through clouds. Radar imaging can see through clouds, and the status of radar imaging today in terms of quality is such that it can discern items. I think that I'm not going to say what the number is, but there's a classified number of what the resolution is, and it's pretty good. And so radar imaging has, certain effectiveness, and the United States is not prone to share its radar imaging technology with the West. I remember during the Gulf War, that product was not shareable with even our closest allies. So I imagine that a similar block on trading that or sharing that intelligence exists. So Europe created its own imaging satellite, radar imaging satellite. And yet when they took an image of Crimea, entire swaths of Crimea were blacked out. I couldn't see through it. Remember, this is radar, it's not clouds. Why couldn't they? Because Russia knew the frequency of the radar and had jammed that area that was sensitive. They didn't want the radar imagers to look into. They had jammed that frequency and made it impossible to read that strip. On the battlefield, Russia deploys forward because of the Ukrainian drones. Russia deploys forward and puts up a literal umbrella of electronic warfare defenses that jam radar imaging, jam the signals of the drones, basically to create this protective umbrella, sort of a digital iron dome, so to speak, over these units. Russia does this better than anybody else. It's all based upon the innovations that have occurred since this war started. So yeah, Russia is dominating in the field of electronic warfare. And I think any American or NATO general would be shocked by how effective Russia is at this and how poorly NATO and American forces can operate in this environment.
How do you see the experience that the Russian army has gained during this battle? Do we have any other army right now, any other country that has such experience?
No, there is no army on the face of the earth that has this experience. The Ukrainian army, of course, has experience, but they're all dead. The people that are fighting today are people who get no training. They don't know how to use the equipment. So even though they're involved in the same battles, you can't compare the two. The Russians, their experiences cuts across the board. When they started, they were dealing with a primarily contract-based military of soldiers who had never seen combat. So a lot of mistakes were made early on. That's just natural. It is what it is. The Russians then mobilized 300,000 reservists. And here's the great victory of this, because the mobilization system was fundamentally broken in Russia. They were in for a rude shock when they sought to mobilize these guys. A lot of corruption they uncovered, a lot of inefficiencies, etc. Some regions performed well, others less well, some didn't perform at all. But Russia learned from this, fixed the problem, and today, in addition to having trained those 300,000, the same system today is absorbing hundreds of thousands of volunteers and training them to a high degree of capability. And all of this training incorporates lessons learned from the special military operation. And so the soldiers that are coming out of the training pipeline have a rough familiarity with what's expected of them in this new environment. It's not like they were trained in the old way, so they have to learn all the mistakes. They've been educated on the right tactics and operational procedures, etc. And there's hundreds of thousands of them who have real world combat experience. Remember, they're fighting against a Ukrainian army that is far more deadly than anything NATO has. Ukraine uses far more artillery than its NATO counterparts. Artillery is the number one killer on the battlefield. Russia knows how to survive in an artillery intensive environment. So if they ever are called upon to face NATO, Russia will understand what the potential threat is and how to deal with it. And NATO lacks the resources to survive in this. We don't have the ammunition. We don't have the tubes. We don't have enough. The Russian military today, a key aspect of any military is logistics, how to sustain itself. Russia today is sustaining hundreds of thousands of troops in a full-time combat posture, logistically, with the ammunition they need, with the food they need, with the fuel they need. Russia's perfected this logistical sustainment. The West can't do anything remotely near this. I don't know how we think if we ever had to fight a war on this scope and scale, we'd be able to logistically support it. We haven't exercised it for some time now. We lack the resources to make this work. It works in peacetime because you can plan and exercise well in advance and pre-stage equipment, and everything's scripted. There ain't no script in war. It's happening. The enemy gets a vote, and if you don't have it, you don't have it. And to get it to you when the enemy's interdicting you, so the West can't sustain this kind of fight logistically, which is the end of their maneuver force. Because if you don't have fuel, if you don't have ammunition, it's over. It's done. So Russia is by far the most combat experienced military in terms of relevant experience related to large-scale ground combat in Europe, in the world. And their troops are, veterans. They have experience that's relevant. The leadership is very sound. Every military in peacetime, and sadly, this speaks to the American military as well, even the Marine Corps. We promote, peacetime warriors, guys who never, look good in peacetime. They're good at putting Marines on parade. They're good at ensuring that Toys for Tots is, adequately executed. They're good at, doing any number of peacetime tasks, even those with combat experience. What was their combat experience? Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, yeah, it was intense for the guys there, but it wasn't anything remotely related to what's going on in Europe today. So, we have a lot of leaders in the American military that, if they were subjected to the kind of stresses and strain that large-scale ground combat presents, would fail. Russia had similar leaders. Vladimir Putin has talked about it. He said, yeah, we went to war with some guys both on the ground and in staff who were perfumed princesses, people who were there for the wrong reasons. They weren't there to be warriors dedicated to waging war. And the system had to weed them out. Russia's been purged of inefficiencies. The officers they have survived the crucible of combat. These are very well, it's like comparing the U.S. Army of 1945 with the U.S. Army of 1942. Rick Atkinson wrote a wonderful trilogy, and you read An Army at Dawn, the first book about, the U.S. Army going into North Africa. And you compare the absolute inefficiency of that, and then you read Day of Battle about the final, the end game stage of that conflict in Europe, and you look at how professional, how efficient, how murderously efficient the U.S. military had become, and that took 3 years to do. The Russian military has gone through this. Today, they are a murderously efficient military. They have perfected the art of not just killing, but survival. And you combine those two, and you have something that is invincible when going up against a military that has no relevant combat experience. And all of NATO, including the United States, fits that definition.
When it comes to the conflict in Gaza and the war in Ukraine, the special military operation, how do you see the contrast, anything in the war in Ukraine that the Israelis could have learned before going in Gaza?
Ukraine is large-scale ground combat, a different kind of war. But there are some lessons. And I come at this question from this perspective. There are Russian officers who have been involved in this in the conflict from the get-go, in the conflict in Ukraine. They were involved in Mariupol, which was urban warfare. And they have taken a look at the Israeli tactics, and they've said, you guys would get slaughtered if you fought the Ukrainians. The Israeli Defense Force would be slaughtered. They'd lose everybody because their tactics are just stupid in terms of large-scale ground combat. But the Israelis aren't fighting a conventional military force. They're fighting an unconventional military force. But, their tactics are stupid, not because they're the wrong tactics, they are, but because they're being executed by a military not trained properly to execute them. The IDF is very sloppy. The concept of security is non-existent. Hamas is able to pop up, destroy tanks, kill Israeli soldiers. armor is going forward unsupported by infantry because the infantry's scared. The Israelis are not a very good military. They're competent to a degree against an enemy like Hamas. But if they fight Hezbollah, and again, the expansion of this conflict that draws in Hezbollah will outclass them every way. Hezbollah has been preparing for this war. Israel's not ready for this war. Their troops are not motivated. There will be slaughtered if they go to war against Hezbollah. The only thing Israel has is an air force. Let's put it this way. If you took the Israeli air force out of the equation in Gaza, Hamas would kill every single Israeli soldier there. That's the truth, because the Israelis just aren't that good.
Is the Netanyahu administration looking for capturing Gaza in totality?
The humanitarian pause was a defeat for Netanyahu. Remember, the Netanyahu government said there will be no ceasefire, and they aren't going to trade, exchange prisoners for hostages, that they're there to defeat Hamas, defeat them politically, militarily, and they were unable to do that. And the implementation of the Dahiyat doctrine, this collective punishment, and you combine that with, again, we have to deal with another reality here. What Israel knew about Hamas in Gaza is no longer at play. Hamas, when they attacked on October 7th, captured the computer servers containing the Israeli intelligence about their assets inside Gaza. So Israel went blind in terms of human resources. They attacked the Unit 8200 signals intelligence platforms. Israel went blind in terms of intercepting communications. So what Israel thought they knew about Gaza changed overnight. When they went in on October 7th, 8th, 9th, and thereafter, they're going in blind. They have to start all over. And how does Israel do this? Through an over-reliance of artificial intelligence. They have a targeting algorithm that they've developed where they've linked each house in Gaza to a specific outcome for Hamas. It doesn't mean that they're going to achieve it, but if you hit this house, this is what it does to Hamas. And they also know that this is how many civilian casualties will be accrued. So there is no, this is collateral damage. We had no idea so many people would die. This is deliberate murder based on target. It's called the gospel. I think the Jewish term is hasbara or something of that nature. That's in play today. This is mass murder, genocide by the Israeli government against the Palestinian people. And it failed. And so it failed on a number of fronts. It failed in regards to Hamas, but because it failed so egregiously, the Netanyahu government was under pressure from a domestic audience saying, hey, you're not succeeding. We need our relatives freed. We need the hostages released. The entire world reacted to this collective punishment, this indiscriminate bombing with horror, millions of people in the streets. The United States State Department filed a memorandum, internal memorandum, a dissent memorandum saying the policies of the Biden administration are destroying the credibility and viability of America abroad. And so we started putting pressure. So Netanyahu had to agree to a ceasefire. He didn't want to. This was a political disaster for him. And so he was looking for any excuse to get out of the ceasefire. He found it. They're now back at war. He can't afford to have a second ceasefire. That would be the end of him politically. But he's failing militarily. As we speak, the Netanyahu government is being, the IDF, is being defeated in certain areas of Gaza. They've had to retreat from certain areas in Gaza because of the casualties they've taken. This is hugely demoralizing for their military. So Netanyahu is in his government are in a very dire straits in terms of their domestic political reality. There's nothing they can do to change the fact that Netanyahu's political days are over. He is the problem, not the solution. he will be removed from power, either from pressure from the United States or pressure from domestic or both. But we need to stop talking about what Israel wants right now. Israel doesn't want anything. Netanyahu wants everything. He needs to be removed and a new, more legitimate Israeli government in place that speaks on behalf of the majority of the Israeli population, then can speak about what they want. They may not change their policies. Who knows? But I think, real politic will set in, and the Israelis are going to have to make adjustments. Economically, they cannot sustain this fight indefinitely. With hundreds of thousands of reservists mobilized who are no longer participating in the economy, with tens of thousands of Israeli citizens displaced from not only around Gaza, but in the north, forced to be resettled, no jobs. They're living off of the support provided by the Israeli government. The economy is faltering. Hundreds of thousands of Israeli Jews are fleeing Israel for more stable locations. This is a strategic defeat, a disaster for Israel, that if they can't find the way to defeat Hamas, and I don't believe they can, you can't defeat an idea, an ideal, especially one that resonates so strongly amongst not only the Palestinian people, but the entire world. It can't be defeated by Israel. So I think Israel won't get what it wants out of this war. We have to understand that they did not initiate this conflict. They didn't want this conflict. They weren't expecting this conflict. The Netanyahu government on October 6th had a policy that was predicated on the normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia, the initiation of this new economic-based conception that was described by Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. Biden announced it during the G20 meeting in India, talked about the India-Middle East Economic Corridor. Benjamin Netanyahu bragged about it during his presentation to the General Assembly in the United Nations. This was the direction that Israel was going. Israel was also, under the Netanyahu government, making sure that there would never be a two-state solution, never be a Palestinian state. They were in the process of expanding operations to create new settlements in the West. And they thought that they had bought off Hamas and the Palestinians in the Gaza by increasing the number of work permits, that this perception of new economic viability on the part of the Gazan Palestinians linked to a relationship with Israel, an ongoing economic relationship, would preclude any precipitous actions by Hamas. So when October 7th came around, the Netanyahu government is faced with a whole new reality. And now they're adjusting to it. And this reality is 100% security, politically motivated. It's couched as a security reaction, but it's political. Benjamin Netanyahu was a politician already fighting for his political life prior to October 7th because of what he had done in terms of rewriting Israeli basic law regarding control of the judiciary. It was supposed to be an independent branch of government, and instead, under the new law, it would be subordinated to a politicized Israeli parliament, the Knesset. And the purpose of this wasn't to improve Israeli jurisprudence, but rather to prevent the prosecution of Benjamin Netanyahu on corruption charges. So, hundreds of thousands of Israelis were already in the streets protesting against this man. The Israeli president had said that the situation was so dire that Israel could be looking at an actual civil war. And then comes October 7th. And so you have this already unpopular prime minister now presiding over the greatest security failure in the history of Israel. This is bigger than 1973 Yom Kippur War. This is a absolute failure on the part of the Netanyahu government, but also Israeli intelligence and the Israeli Defense Force themselves. And so the entire leadership of Israel is at risk of losing political viability, meaning that they should and could possibly be removed from power at any moment. The only reason why they're staying in power is because the Netanyahu government now has declared war, or as they have said, war was declared on Israel by Hamas. And if you're in for a dime, you might as well be in for a dollar. So if you're going to go to war with Hamas, now you articulate goals and objectives that reflect this war status. And you say that Israel is going to destroy not only the military aspects of Hamas, the organizational structures of Hamas, but politically, Hamas will be eliminated. Hamas will never again rule Gaza. And if you look at it from that standpoint, Israel has failed across the board. When we take a look at the millions of people who are in the streets in cities around the world protesting in support of Palestine, they're protesting in support of Hamas. They may not admit they are, but the reality is they wouldn't be there if it weren't for Hamas. They wouldn't be there if Hamas hadn't attacked Israel and created this overreaction, or the opportunity for this overreaction. It's Israel that has done it to itself. Israel didn't need to invoke the Dahiya doctrine, named after the West Beirut suburb, which in 2006 Israel flattened as part of a new principle of